You are now experiencing the digital life with Kevin Lockett.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Digital Life. On today's show, I'll talk to Time Magazine's Joel Stein on the new gig economy and the shared economy. Now, when I first started the podcast, I needed a logo for iTunes. Plus, I wanted an intro that reminded me of the hip-hop mixtapes I used to buy in New Jersey when my family and I went on vacations in Atlantic City. Thanks to Fiverr, I was able to find a great graphic designer who did my logo for $5, as well as a great voiceover guy named Donald Jr. who handled my intros and outros, again for $5. In his recent piece for Time Magazine, Joel Stein talked about the pros and cons of using platforms like Fiverr and TaskRabbit, because on one hand, you're getting quality work, but the prices are really, really low. So are we taking advantage of people or actually giving people work in today's U.S. economy? So without further ado, here's my conversation with Joel Stein from Time Magazine.
Okay, we're talking to Joel Stein. How are you today?
I'm close to throwing up at all times. I caught my son's stomach flu, so I might be the first guest to vomit on your show.
And yes, sir, this will be the best podcast ever if that does happen.
The tension right now is kind of exciting, right? Like
it is. It's kind of like we're on a high wire, and anything can happen at any second. That's
the trick to storytelling. You just establish the premise right away, and then you stretch the tension out.
Yeah. Speaking of storytelling, so by the time the show airs, Craig Ferguson will be done. So you've been a guest on Craig Ferguson. I've been a big fan of Craig Ferguson. I don't think he gets enough credit. So for a guy who interviews people for a living, what is it like being interviewed by Craig? Because Craig doesn't follow any rules, and you have no idea which way he's going when it comes to questions.
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but it's similar to the way I interview people, especially now. If you're interviewing someone who's famous, there's so much information about them out there that it doesn't make sense for me to ask them questions I know the answer to. So I just kind of try to get them to engage on whatever they're thinking about right then, or bring them out into the real world so they have to interact with other people. That seems much, I learn a lot more about them by doing that than just asking them, specific questions. So I consider an interview really successful if I don't ask any questions whatsoever.
Have you always been an inquisitive type person?
I didn't think so, but I did not do well with dating because I was bad at asking women out. I was bad at actually closing, but I was good at dates because I do ask a lot of questions, which is the whole trick to dating, I think. So, yeah, compared to other people, I think I'm more comfortable asking questions than telling stories.
Now you say you're bad at closing, but now you're married and you got a child.
Yeah, I was occasionally able to close. It just took a lot of hints for me.
So the reason I contacted you, I was in Books A Million. I'm one of those rare people who still love books.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the magazine section, and Time Magazine had their Your Digital Life. It was talking about all these things about social media and digital media. And then at the very end, there was an article that you wrote about the new economy and using Fiverr. For those who don't know anything about Fiverr, could you describe it, please?
Fiverr, which has a lot of R's at the end of it, is a website where people, creative types, can go and list things they would do for $5. You actually can wind up charging people more than that, but the premise is, I will write your theme song or your jingle, or I will make flyers for you, or I will create a logo for you for $5. And they do some impressive stuff there.
Yeah, when I first launched my podcast, I used Fiverr because I never heard of it before. And iTunes said I needed to have a logo, and I said, well, where can I find a logo? And then I wanted an intro for my show, so I found Fiverr, and I found this great guy. He did a wonderful intro for me, and I worked with this guy. He created a great logo for me. And even though I'm proud of the work, I felt a little bit bad because, I felt like, well, they did all this great work, and they even did some revisions for me, and it was only just for $5. I felt like I was taking advantage of them.
You were. You totally were. You should feel bad. Yeah, it's a weird. Now, of course, he is using a version of that logo for everyone, so he's not doing as much work as you think. But it's still, any work is too much for $5. Yeah, it's. I think about this all the time as far as being a paid columnist. And then there's a million bloggers out there doing it for free, and I'm kind of well aware that there's a lot of people willing to do fun stuff for free or next to free. So a lot of what were jobs are kind of becoming hobbies.
And it gets a little bit problematic because you might have people out there who say they're writers, but you don't know if they're paying someone to write all their pieces for them. You know, you could very easily say, hey, I want Kevin to go out there and write a story about fiber optics, and I don't know anything about it, and I'm paying the person $5 to actually write that story. So sometimes, yeah, so I'm not saying people should do that. You shouldn't do it because that's just completely wrong. But after a while, it does make you wonder if that's going to be a problem where people are using other people to write the articles for them.
Yeah, you really have to, as a reader, be careful about what publication you're reading. You know, there's so much out there that's not. It's a lot harder now. It used to be you could just trust things for the most part, or there were more markers to tell you if you could trust something because there was more barrier to entry. Now that all websites kind of look the same, it's sort of hard to tell who to trust, and you kind of have to put together a bunch of sources. I get stuff sent to me all the time. Some of it's from my wife that was like, look at this. You know, this is this horrible health thing or whatever it is. And I'm like, that's the Daily Mail. And, you know, if you don't know English newspapers, you think the Daily Mail is the same as, you know, the Guardian. So and now with more and more websites, you just have to be aware of who to trust and look at a bunch of different sources.
Right. So for the beginning of your article, you used a person from TaskRabbit, and they found a writer for you from Youngstown. I'm in Akron, so Youngstown's not too far from me. So what was the process like when you hired a guy to write the first paragraph? Did you tell him, I just want you to write the first paragraph, or did he just write a story and you just kind of took what you wanted?
You know, I think for $5, they would only give you like 250 words or 300 words, and my column's closer to 900. So I wanted to keep to the $5 concept, so I told him just to write at the beginning. Right. And he did a fine job. I asked two people to do it, and he did a better job, so I used his. $10 worth it.
Yeah, if people don't know, if you never use Fiverr, it's not just $5. $5 is basically, you can use that service, but then they have more services. They have $10 or $20. But the guy that I use, like when he first started out, he gave me sound effects and vocals for $5, and then I think he wised up. And so now, if you want sound effects, that's up to $10, and if you want something else, that's another $20. So, you know, he probably felt like I'm doing all this work for $5, so I need to spread out all my services to make more money.
Well, I interviewed some people about, you know, services I used on Fiverr, and some of them said it was like a loss leader. Like the guy who did my jingle said that it's gotten him a lot of attention, and that it's gotten him some bigger work, and he's actually making a living off of writing music now because some people heard his jingles and then offered him like more substantial work. So I could see that working too.
So after the guy wrote that paragraph for you, you mentioned that you started rating $5 bills. So you had you did a bunch of stuff. You had a guy copy it for you. You had Ivana from Serbia, which I couldn't really pronounce her last name, but she had and Ivana actually held up a sign with your name on it. So of all the things that you spent $5 on, what was your favorite?
Well, Ivana from Serbia took some very. She's like a model, and she took pictures of herself holding a sign with the name of my column. That was pretty good. I got a rap. I got a jingle. It was kind of awesome. I keep coming back to the jingle. I also got someone to put flyers all over some college, I think the University of Chicago, with my column on it. That was pretty good. They were all good. I mean, $5, so everything was great.
So let me ask you this. You've been writing for a long time. So if you were Joe Stein right now, would you rather be in this era where you can write wherever you want to write and maybe get your name out there, or do you like it how you start off, where you kind of intern and you kind of learn and you wrote and you just kind of work your way up? I mean, which way is better, the old school way of getting into the business, or the new school way of maybe you can make your mark a little bit earlier, but at the same time you might be lost in the sea of bloggers?
Oh, the new school way would be much better to me if I were coming out now, because it was so frustrating. Like I had written this column in college that I was kind of proud of, and I wanted to write some more, and I just couldn't. There just wasn't a place that would give me a chance. And it's not like the stuff I was doing, fact-checking mostly, was. I mean, it was helping me network and know people and see how the system worked, but at a really slow rate. I mean, it wasn't really helping me become a better writer at all. So, you know, the competition is much more stiff now, because you had to have the wherewithal to move to New York, take a crappy job, live in an apartment with like 5 people. Like, I'm sure it's worse now because it's more expensive now, but it was hard. It took some initiative, but I'd much rather have a system now where there's more people competing, but you have, if you're good, you have a chance of being seen. I'd much rather. I just wanted to write, so yeah, it would have been great.
So recently, in one of your articles, you're selling your house. I don't know if you sold your house yet. So Yeah. But you did something interesting, 'cause I didn't know this was even going on, where people are making videos to sell their homes out in Cali. Yeah, that is amazing. It's like, they're making like mini movies. Yeah.
The guy who's kind of the best at this is actually in Nashville. So it's not just like, that's the crazy part. It's not just the crazy Beverly Hills. I'm not in Beverly Hills, but it's not a crazy, Hamptons, Beverly Hills thing. It's like rich people in Nashville and other cities are doing this too. So, they're making like movies about their house, which have little stories and plots and actors in them, which I found hilarious. So I got some friends of mine. The guy's really expensive who makes them, so instead I got some friends of mine to do it for free, who made a murder mystery, which is probably not the best way to sell your house.
Yeah, I think I read the description. It was kind of like silk stockings, but and then I had to do a flashback. Like, oh, silk stockings. I remember. I remember that show.
It was very silk stockings. There's a very attractive woman playing my wife, and apparently she had killed me. So that's part of why she saw it in the house.
So did you get any responses from the video?
Yeah, a lot of people saw the video. Again, I actually had nothing to do with it. I got really young friends of mine who are definitely new economy people. I met these guys. This guy interviewed me while he was in college, and I just been able to watch. My wife took like a liking to him and has gotten him jobs. But I've watched him like navigate this new economy without graduating from college, never having a job, and just like hustling. Like he doesn't have much money, but he like makes videos and performs and writes things and gets hired occasionally by different people to work on stuff. So I was out of town, and he just came to my house and made this video. And I guess he showed me the script, so I knew it was about. But yeah, he just did it himself. It was great.
Going back to Fiverr for a second, I think people are starting to learn more about it, which is good. There's a lot of great things you can find on there. But at the same time, it does worry me that maybe some of these companies who don't like to pay people anyway might start using it as a blueprint, saying, hey, we don't need to pay anybody anything. My fear is our economy, which is still pretty shaky, might actually end up being worse if more companies decide to go this way of just using like cheap labor like all the time.
Well, yeah, that's the way things are going for sure. I mean, between globalization and the freelance economy, it's a lot cheaper to pay people, occasionally to do something than to have an employee. So there's a huge group of people, it's growing every year, who don't have the kind of basic services that corporations provided, which is, your retirement or your health insurance or, other people are kind of falling into place both from the government and private sector to fill those needs, but they're still largely unfilled. I mean, people, like my friend who is piecing together all his work, he's paying for his own health insurance, but he doesn't have any of the other, what we used to consider basic job perks. He doesn't have any of them. If he's sick, he's just sick.
Right.
Yeah, it's the freelance world. I'm in it. I've been a freelancer for 9 years now. So I know I have some idea of what it's like. It's a little scary.
Yeah, what was that like when you made your transition from going from working for a company to becoming a freelancer?
Well, I moved from New York to L.A., so I wasn't working in an office anymore. That was a huge difference. I got my health insurance from the Writers Guild because I do some sitcom writing, so that's so far been good. I have to make sure to write write something every year, which is hard, to keep that. The rest of it, it's, there's no, it's nice because you control your own vacations, but you don't have any paid vacations. And, if you're not working, just going to the office kind of makes you some money, and that's no longer the case.
So do you have any books coming up? Because the last book you wrote that I can remember is when you basically talk about masculinity.
That's
which
the
is
only book I've ever written. Yeah.
That's the only book you ever. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. You only got one. I figured you seem like a type of guy that would have like quite a few books out there, but yeah, you only have the one.
I just signed a contract to write another one. I don't know what I'm going to write. I find them challenging. I find that one challenging. I don't know. I got to come up with something better than that.
Well, yeah, because I saw a documentary on George Plimpton like a few years ago, a few months ago. Yeah, and some of the stuff, and some of the stuff that he was doing kind of reminded me of the stuff that you did with your book, where you're just kind of trying these things and just kind of experimenting and see how it works out. If some of it you excelled in, some of it you didn't. But I knew George Plimpton was a writer, but I didn't know much about him before the documentary. But afterwards, I had so much admiration for him. It just seems like he just did whatever he wanted and wrote great stories, and he was just a wonderful storyteller.
Oh yeah, but he used to. I mean, I do things for like a day or two. He used to do like a whole season of playing with the Lions or boxing, Archie Manning, or I went to a couple parties at his house when I first got to New York. That was super exciting. All those famous authors there, and I called him once or twice for advice on stories, or to quote him really for stories I was doing, and he was always kind of great. It's weird. I didn't know much of his stuff, but when I found out what he did, I was like, oh, that's the stuff I like to do.
What was his parties like?
Oh, they're always the same. They're awesome. They're in his giant apartment on the Upper East Side of New York, and they felt like, to me, and I haven't really seen parties like that since. They seem like stereotypical New York literary parties where people stood around with cocktails and, you'd see a couple famous writers. Everyone was chatting, and he had all these he'd hire a lot of hot young college graduates to run the Paris Review. Definitely had a predilection for a certain type of woman that he kept hiring. So they were always around running the place, and it felt very old school.
Was there any advice that he gave you as a writer that really stuck with you?
No, I mean, I didn't know him that well. I just would call him before I did some stupid sports thing and get his advice on how to do it. No, and he was such a different person than me. He was a big, athletic. He just engaged life in a much more complete way than I do. I'm here. I think he lived much more than me, and so I don't think we were that similar.
So you still didn't pick up any tips from Terry Crews when you worked out with him?
Oh my God, Terry Crews is the best person in the world. I cannot get over what a great guy that is. It was. I wish I'd lived every day like Terry Crews. He doesn't eat till 2 p.m. He works out he does 2 days basically, but wakes up at 4. He's a pretty amazing guy. And I think he's really centered right now. I think he used to be a little too ambitious, if that's possible, and ignoring his family a little bit. But I think he's much more centered now. He seems like a really thoughtful. And when he's working out, he's listening to some really intense book at the same time. So he's super smart, and I really, really like that guy.
Well, Joe Stein, thank you for the conversation. If people need to check you out, where can they go?
I feel like I should vomit now. I feel like this whole thing didn't deliver on the promise. So because I was disappointed. I figured, I'm going to cut this interview short. He hasn't thrown up yet. Yep. So if you could insert some vomit special effects, I think that would at least feel satisfying to the listener. You know what? I think that what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go on Fiverr. Okay, hire someone there. Well, maybe not hire someone to throw up. But I'm going to find someone who maybe has sound effects that has someone throwing up, and then somehow put it into the show. Now. Yeah, I was going to do some for you now, but I think it'd be better to have a professional, a $5 professional do it. Other than the vomiting sound effects, I have nothing coming up that anyone has to be aware of. So let's say that you offered your services on Fiverr. What could you offer outside of maybe writing? But what else could you offer on Fiverr? For $5? For $5. God, the things I would do for $5 are exactly the same as things I would do for $0. I can't think of anything I would do. I don't think I'm writing a kind of long story for time about the sharing economy, so I'm doing a bunch of sharing economy stuff. I was a Lyft driver for a night, and I had people over my house that I made dinner for on this other site called Eat With, and I don't think there's a bunch I would do for $5. What about you? I can read a passage from my Spike Lee autobiography for $5. Yeah, I'll read a page from Spike Lee's autobiography for $5. And if you want the whole thing, then we have to discuss payment. You would do that for free, though, wouldn't you? I would. So I'm still a Spike guy, so yeah. Talking about the sharing economy, at the beginning part of the article, you said basically when you talk about the new economy, you were talking about the fact that you are using Uber and you're using Amazon Fresh. Yep. And because I don't think we have Amazon Fresh out here in Ohio. No, it's only a couple places right now.
Yeah, so I mean, so how does that work with Amazon Fresh? Do you just say, hey, I want this, and just like it's like the old school, like the guys used to bring the milk. I mean, is it just like that?
Yeah. Well, you go on this site and you click on everything you want to order, and they get it from like all kinds of. They'll just so there'll be like some fish place I like that's kind of far away, or some butcher I like, but go to those places if they have deals with them. They go to those places, and then like you have to do it about 2 days in advance, and then it all shows up at your doorstep.
I guess you're still working on the sharing economy story, but how did you feel afterwards when you did all these different things?
I mean, it's mostly really cool. There's definitely like some unfairness in the system, but some of that unfairness has to do with kind of the death of giant corporations and giant media, and it's not really the sharing economy's fault. There's a lot of unemployed people right now who are willing to do things, and that's not their fault. But we need some other system in place to help people for sure. I think they're aware of that.
Does your wife kind of embrace the same thing? Like, is she really into like
no?
No.
She won't let me.
Yeah.
She won't let me Airbnb our house. I was renting out my car on relay rides. She thought that was insane. The dinner I threw was just a pain in the ass to her. No, she's not. She's not down. Although she likes to use the Lyft and Uber.
Well, I guess that is something where, you know, I mean, when you're sharing something like that, I mean, you are sharing a piece of yourself. And you're allowing people in your car, you're allowing people in your home. That's a lot to ask people.
Yeah, I think she and I are different that way. Like, I like that stuff. And she's a little more cautious.
Yeah. Well, I started out the interview, and you still didn't throw up. So I'm glad.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I just ended. Insert some special effects. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, great talking to you, Joel. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
I want to thank Joel Stein for being a great guest on The Digital Life. Make sure you check out his article From $9 to $5 on TimeMagazine.com or Time Magazine's Your Digital Life User Guide. Also, be sure to check out Joel's article Tales from the Shared Economy in the February 9th edition of Time Magazine. Before I go, I have a Twitter question for you. Tweet me at Kevin Lockett and tell me your experiences of being part of the new gig economy, including using platforms like TaskRabbit and Fiverr. Use the hashtag GigKL. That's the hashtag GigKL. And tell me your experiences of being part of the new gig economy. All right, everybody. It's The Digital Life. I'm Kevin Lockett, and I'm out.
The Digital Life with Kevin Lockett.